He was widely considered a hopeless case. Nobody dared to venture near him. In a rural Vermont rescue shelter, a German shepherd named Shadow had evolved from a resident into a cautionary tale. Volunteers spoke of him in hushed tones. The staff affixed notes to his kennel reading, "Do not approach." Even the most experienced handlers were unwilling to get too close. Shadow did not bark or wag his tail for affection like the other dogs. He snarled. He lunged. He showed his teeth to anyone who approached, particularly men. His kennel had transformed into his stronghold, a domain of growls and quiet hostility. 8 months had gone by since his arrival. He had been discovered chained to a fence on an abandoned farm, his ribs protruding and his eyes dark and empty. The prevailing theory was that he had been conditioned as a guard dog by a cruel owner, possibly even exploited for intimidation. His true history remained a mystery. All that was known was his aversion to people and his unwillingness to be helped. He was deemed unadoptable until a quiet morning when Dr. Rachel Moore came into the shelter, her 10-year-old daughter, Leia, by her side. Rachel was not seeking a pet. She was a trauma therapist who specialized in behavioral recovery. Yet, when she walked past Shadow's kennel and their eyes locked, a shift occurred, not within the dog, but within her. Rachel did not go to the kennel immediately. She paused several feet away, resting a gentle hand on Leia's shoulder as they both observed him. Shadow was huddled in the rearmost corner, his large body folded as if attempting to vanish. His fur was patchy and lifeless, and his posture was rigid. But his eyes were wide open, fixed on Rachel with a peculiar, guarded focus. It wasn't anger or a threat, it was sheer fear. "What's his story?" Rachel inquired, her voice soft. The shelter manager, a kind yet wary woman named Trish, let out a sigh. "He was found on a deserted farm, in chains. No provisions for food or shelter. He has never bitten anyone, but he's come very close, especially with men." As if triggered by the conversation, a male volunteer passed a few feet away, and Shadow leaped up with a guttural snarl, throwing himself against the kennel bars. Trish winced. The volunteer muttered something and walked faster. "We've tried behaviorists, medication, everything," Trish continued. "He won't let anyone get through to him." But in that display, Rachel perceived something more than just aggression. She saw a survival instinct. A dog that had been taught that humans signified danger. A dog that had constructed such formidable barriers that even compassion could not penetrate them. "May I sit down here?" she asked, indicating the floor before his kennel. Trish was hesitant but gave a nod. "He will not approach you." "That's all right," Rachel responded. "I am not here to make any demands of him." She settled onto the floor cross-legged and took a book from her bag. As Rachel made herself comfortable on the floor, Leia squatted next to her for a moment, her eyes filled with curiosity. "She has always adored animals," Rachel whispered to Trish with a soft smile. "Especially dogs." Leia edged nearer to the kennel, maintaining her distance but completely captivated. "He's not mad," she said quietly, almost to herself. "He's afraid. I think he is just trying to keep himself safe." Trish arched an eyebrow. "Smart girl. She takes after her mother." Rachel smiled, running a hand through Leia's curls. "She hopes to study animal behavior someday. She said she came today not only to assist, but also to learn." Rachel started to read in a low voice, not directly to Shadow, but simply in his presence. 2 days after their initial visit, Rachel discovered Leia on the back porch, a sketch pad on her lap. She had drawn Shadow once more, yet this time he wasn't snarling but resting peacefully under a tree, his eyes half closed. "I believe he could be different," Leia said gently, her gaze still on the drawing. "If he were just given a proper chance." Rachel joined her, sweeping wind-tousled hair from her daughter's face. "Sweetheart, that kind of recovery requires a great deal of time, and it's not simple." "I know," Leia replied, looking up, "but you always tell your patients that the most difficult paths are the ones most worth taking. Perhaps he's just waiting for people like us." Those words resonated with Rachel long after Leia had gone to sleep. That evening, she re-examined Shadow's files, this time not as a therapist evaluating risk, but as a mother who had heard her daughter's quiet faith. The following morning, she turned in the adoption paperwork. At the shelter's board meeting, the response was swift. "He is dangerous," stated Dr. Morgan, the shelter's lead veterinarian. "Unpredictable. We have observed no lasting improvement. His place is in a specialized facility, not in a family home, particularly one with a child. Rachel maintained a calm tone. He is not inherently aggressive. He is terrified. His actions stem from trauma, not a desire for dominance. What he requires is trust, consistency, and a secure environment. Another board member chimed in. You are a single mother. What qualifies you to handle a situation like this? Rachel met their gaze directly. I work from my home. I am experienced in trauma recovery. And Leah is not your average 10-year-old. She is cautious. She pays attention. And she was the one who first proposed that we bring Shadow home. Trish, having witnessed the visit from Rachel and Leah, finally spoke up. She is correct. That child sat outside Shadow's kennel and did not even flinch. She observed what most of the adults overlooked. Shadow didn't snarl at her. That is uncommon. That is significant. Following a tense discussion, the board cast their votes. It was a narrow margin, 4-3. Ultimately, Rachel's application received approval under strict terms. Weekly progress reports, routine sessions with a behaviorist, and an agreement for immediate return should any incident arise. As Rachel completed the documents, she met Leah's gaze through the shelter window. The young girl offered a small, hopeful smile that seemed to say, I knew you would see what I saw. Bringing Shadow home was the first significant challenge. He resisted entering the crate, retreating with low growls whenever anyone approached. Rachel did not compel him. With Trish's assistance, they set up a temporary divider in the back of Rachel's SUV, providing Shadow with an area he could enter willingly. After nearly half an hour of waiting, gentle persuasion, and sheer patience, he got in. Leah had come for the pickup, sitting quietly on the curb as the adults managed the situation. She remained silent, simply observing Shadow with unwavering, considerate eyes. As the dog finally entered the vehicle, their gazes connected through the car window. Leah's small hand pressed softly against the glass, not as a wave, but as a silent connection, a promise to him. We will guide you toward healing. The journey home was fraught with tension. Shadow panted intensely, his body wound as tightly as a coil. Leah sat in the front seat beside Rachel, holding her sketchbook. The drawing today was new. It featured Shadow not by himself, but resting under a tree as a girl sat quietly next to him, reading a book. When they reached their small farmhouse, the sun was already setting. Rachel got out first, leaving the car doors open so Shadow could watch her. She placed a training leash on the ground and then stood far back. No coercion. Shadow remained motionless for a moment, then stepped out tentatively, his nose down and tail low. He followed the leash into the house, maintaining his distance. Inside, his dedicated space was prepared. A doorless crate with soft bedding, and an environment free of loud noises or breakable items. Everything was set up for security and recovery. Leah appeared from around the hallway corner, her eyes bright with hope. Is this his permanent spot? Rachel affirmed. If he chooses it to be. Shadow stood still, observing them both. He had not barked. He had not growled. But he had entered the house. And Leah held a true belief that maybe, just maybe, he was prepared to start over. Progress was subtle, arriving in small increments rather than grand gestures. In the first week, Shadow would only eat if Rachel and Leah were out of the room. He hardly strayed from his spot, reacting to every unfamiliar noise and every change in the light. However, he had stopped growling and never once attempted to escape. Every morning, Leah would silently set a fresh bowl of food near his crate and place a small drawing beside it. A sun, a heart, a dog with expressive eyes. So he knows he isn't alone, she explained to Rachel with quiet resolve. One afternoon, Leah inquired, why does he look at me but not get any closer? Rachel sat next to her on the floor. That isn't anger, Leah. It's watchfulness. He is observing us to determine if we are safe. His world was once filled with peril. He is slowly realizing that we are not the same. But I love him, Leah whispered. I know. And loving him means we must go at his speed, not ours, Rachel said softly. Observe his ears, his tail, the way he adjusts his weight. Those are his words. He is communicating when he is frightened or when he is interested. Leah nodded with gravity, taking in every word. By the second week, Shadow started to eat while they were still present, provided they kept their distance. He began to sleep more soundly, no longer resting with one eye partially open. The tight knot of anxiety that had previously defined him started to loosen. Then, the night that altered everything arrived. Rachel had just concluded reading aloud, seated cross-legged on the floor. Leah was upstairs with her homework. Shadow suddenly rose and started to pace, wide, anxious circuits around the living room. Rachel knew the signs: restlessness, distress, a fearful need. When he headed for the back door, Rachel stood up slowly and went for the handle. Shadow lunged. The growl was deep and sharp, his body taut, mouth agape. Rachel stopped in her tracks, but he did not bite. Instead, he bolted past her into the yard, circled once, and then squatted. And she realized what had happened. He hadn't known how to signal his need. Her abrupt movement had startled him, but he had not attacked. He had practiced self-control. That evening, Leah helped fasten a small bell on a ribbon by the door. "We will teach him how to ask," she declared. Rachel smiled, her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "And we will teach you how to listen." It occurred late on a Saturday afternoon. Rachel was in the kitchen making dinner. Leah was seated cross-legged on the floor nearby, humming while she colored a drawing of Shadow beneath a snow-covered tree. Outside, the wind grew stronger, making the windows rattle. A delivery truck entered their long gravel driveway. Before either of them could respond, a loud knock sounded at the front door, followed by the jiggling of the handle. Shadow shot from his corner like an arrow. He did not bark initially. He just moved quickly, with purpose, and for the first time, not away from a threat, but toward it. He positioned himself between Rachel and the front door, his body rigid, head lowered, and hackles raised. Then the growl erupted, deep, guttural, and protective, the kind that sends a shiver down your spine. Rachel instinctively put a hand on Leah's shoulder, gently steering her to stand behind her. She did not reach for Shadow or call his name. Instead, she addressed the door. "Please leave the package on the porch," she called out in a steady voice. "We will get it later." Through the window, she watched the surprised delivery man place the box down and retreat. Shadow held his ground, unmoving, his eyes fixed on the door even after the truck was gone. Only after the wind had subsided and quiet returned did Shadow gradually relax his posture, his ears still alert and his chest still heaving. "Thank you," Rachel said quietly, not venturing to touch him. "You were protecting us, weren't you?" Leah came forward slowly, kneeling at a safe distance. "He didn't just get frightened," she whispered. "He held his ground." Rachel met her gaze. "That is trust, Leah. It's not perfect yet, but it's a start." Shadow did not go back to his corner that evening. Instead, he lay down by the front door, a silent guardian who had finally accepted that they were his to defend. By the middle of winter, a peaceful routine had formed in their household. Each morning, Rachel and Leah moved with care through Shadow's world, not dominating it, but existing within it. Leah would read to him from her favorite books about animals, sitting at a respectful distance. Rachel coached her on interpreting his cues. A lowered tail indicated anxiety. A soft blink signified trust. Mealtimes became slow, peaceful rituals, with Leah carefully placing his bowl a little closer each day. Advancement was measured in inches, not miles. But healing was undoubtedly taking place, slowly and steadily. One snowy morning, Leah was at home with a cold, wrapped in blankets by the fireplace. Rachel took Shadow for their regular trail walk by herself. The snow was new, covering the forest in a silent, white layer. Rachel let Shadow off his leash. Just for a few minutes. He had earned that bit of freedom. Then, something changed. Shadow froze, his ears erect and his nose to the wind. A moment later, he dashed into the woods. "Shadow!" Rachel yelled, her heart pounding. She pursued him, breaking through the undergrowth, her boots sinking into the snow. She found him standing over a figure partially covered in white. It was a young man, likely in his 20s, barely awake and shivering violently. His hiking boots were soaked through, and his leg was bent at an unnatural angle. A backpack was nearby, mostly hidden by snow. He must have fallen and been there for hours. Rachel knelt down swiftly. His pulse was weak, his breathing shallow. Shadow did not back away or bark. He remained next to the man, his tail stiff but not tucked, occasionally prodding the man's arm with his nose as if to check on him. Rachel dialed 911 and provided their location. "He is not responsive. Probable hypothermia, possible leg fracture." As they waited, Rachel draped her coat over the man and leaned in close to Shadow. "You did not run from him," she whispered. "You stayed." When the rescue team, composed entirely of men, arrived, Shadow grew tense and his body stiffened, but he did not lunge. There was no snarling, just a low growl that was quickly quieted by Rachel's calm demeanor beside him. "It's all right," she assured him. "They are here to help." Shadow stood resolutely by her side, breathing heavily but evenly. That evening, back at home, Leia listened with awe as Rachel recounted the day's events. She looked at her drawing, a sketch of Shadow standing protectively beside a fallen hiker, and smiled. "Mom," she said softly, "he didn't just get better, he made a choice to be." The snowstorm arrived just a few days after the rescue. Power lines across the valley were down. The house grew progressively colder. Rachel started a fire in the living room fireplace, while Leia helped collect blankets and pillows, creating a warm nest nearby. Shadow paced anxiously at first, disturbed by the flickering flames and the disruption to their routine. "We'll be fine, buddy," Rachel said gently. "It's only one cold night." Leia placed her sketchbook close by, a new drawing showing the three of them nestled near the fire. "He can sleep near us," she whispered, "if he wants." Shadow did not come closer initially. He took his usual spot, just beyond their reach but still within view. But at some point around 3 a.m., Rachel awoke from a light sleep to see that Shadow had moved. He was now lying curled up beside Leia, not in contact with her, but close enough for them to share warmth. Rachel said nothing. She did not reach out. She simply placed another log on the fire and whispered, "Good night, brave boy." When morning arrived, the house was still chilly, but something fundamental inside it had shifted. Shadow no longer slept in the distant corner. That day, he trailed Rachel from one room to another, still wary but staying close. He brushed against her leg in the hall and lingered longer by Leia's chair. That evening, as Rachel was at her desk, Shadow came over. He sat beside her quietly, then leaned in just a little until his head came to rest gently on her knee. Rachel froze. Then, slowly, she moved her hand just an inch, not pushing, not guiding, and placed it on top of his head. Shadow remained there, and in that instant, the gap between fear and trust closed. Spring brought a letter. The shelter board was officially concluding their monitoring period, citing the remarkable progress they had seen. The letter stated, "We view Shadow's rehabilitation as a success, one that will guide our work in the future." An invitation was included. Would Rachel and Shadow consider coming back to the shelter to talk with potential adopters? Rachel accepted, and on this occasion, Leia joined them, holding Shadow's leash with confidence as they entered the familiar gates. The staff stopped in their tracks. They recalled the snarling, unapproachable animal who had once trembled in the corner of his kennel. Now, Shadow walked calmly next to the girl he trusted above all others. "I cannot believe that is the same dog," a volunteer murmured. Inside the education room, about a dozen people were seated in a semicircle. Some were there with hopes of adopting, while others were merely interested. Rachel stood at the front, with Shadow resting by her feet, his head near Leia's hand. "I am not a dog trainer," she started. "I am a trauma therapist, and I applied what I have learned from my work with people to Shadow." She described her approach. No coercion, no dominance, no shortcuts. Shadow did not need to be dominated. He needed to feel secure. He needed to choose to connect, not be compelled to. She paused, then glanced at Shadow, who was now lying peacefully, his breathing slow and even. His aggression was never the problem. It was his solution, his shield. Our role was not to shatter it, but to provide him with reasons to let it down. Leia shyly raised her hand. "I used to believe that dogs just required love," she said. "But they also need to be understood." Shadow didn't change because we forced him to. He changed because we were patient. A young couple at the back looked at each other, then inquired about a frightened shepherd mix they had noticed in the kennels. "Do you believe he has a chance to?" Rachel smiled. "Every dog has a past. And if you are prepared to listen, to truly listen, then healing is always within reach." Later that evening, back at their home, Rachel sat by the fireplace while Leia rested her head in her lap. Shadow was lying nearby, a paw extended toward the warm glow, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm of peace. On the wall above them was a timeline of photos, charting every milestone of progress. The first time Shadow entered the house, the night he rang the bell to go out, the instant he rested his head in Rachel's hand. Tucked among the photographs was something new, a certificate on plain white paper. Leia Moore Jr., animal companion and care volunteer. It was a gift from the shelter, acknowledging her part in Shadow's transformation. Rachel had been moved to tears when she first saw it. Leia had accepted it quietly, almost bashfully. "It's not that important," she had said. But Rachel knew it was. It signified that Leia had discovered her own start, her own journey. "You helped him get better," Rachel whispered now, stroking Leia's hair. Not just with affection, but with patience and with empathy. Leia smiled, looking at her most recent drawing. The three of them sitting together under a blossoming apple tree. "This one is for spring." In a world prone to quick judgments, Shadow served as a testament that aggression is not malice, that fear is not a failing, and that healing can be achieved not with force, but with presence. Rachel looked at Shadow, who was now watching the fire, calm and secure. "You didn't need to be fixed," she whispered. "You just needed to be seen." And for Leia, the path was just beginning. Shadow may not have been the first rescued soul in her life, but perhaps, just perhaps, he had revealed to her who she was always meant to be.